Okay, this is Mike's top five games. Well, let's say five games of the year of 2023. From least nerdy to most nerdy. This first one is actually a little bit of a cop out. It's not really a game of the year, it's just what I'm currently playing, and I think it's worth recommending. This is Everspace 1. I got into it through a demo for Everspace 2, which is the more recent open world RPG version of it. But this is the roguelite original space shooter. It's incredibly cheap. It's a few dollars, including with the DLC. And basically, like many games of its era, it was inspired a great deal by FTL popularizing the roguelite genre. But basically, as you can kind of see, it's a 3D space arcade game. Dogfighting, a tiny little bit of mining, but only ever for a few, like 30 seconds at a time, so it doesn't outstay its welcome. And then there's a few little dungeons as well, which are like space stations you can fly inside, ruined space stations you can go inside and explore. It's a bit like a looter shooter. I found the demo for Everspace 2 really tedious because it had like infinity mechanics for upgrades and loot and rarity, and I was just like, this is too much detail, this is boring. Whereas Everspace 1 I found to be beautifully, like this guy here from the video I'm showing you is choosing between shield breaking missiles and light missiles. The thing that adds variety to the gameplay is the weapon and equipment loadout. So you can have a few different weapons, a few different support modules, a few different consumables, and it's a roguelite. So when you eventually die, which you are expected to, you get to carry some currency forwards, buy some permanent upgrades, maybe unlock another ship or another colour scheme, and then go again. In the last however many years, I've basically lost interest in games where there are no consequences, no potential of failure, which is why I play a lot of roguelikes and other games where if you lose, you have to learn from it and start again, and that's what this is. Each combat is in a small, manageably sized area of space that's only a minute or two to fly across at most, and you get sort of 10 minutes there or something before a big bad guy appears and chases you out. So it forces you to keep going. There's none of the stuff I don't like about truly open world games. This game has intentional pacing. You have to keep moving forward, you've got to get what you can out of the zone before the bad guys arrive. Usually, there's another good, wise pacing decision of this game is every so often you get a zone without a timer and you can chill a little bit more. Oh, here's the inventory screen, right? So we've got a pulse leg, so it looks like this guy is trying to craft a new gun. The crafting interface is slightly annoying, but anyway, yeah, it's lightweight, it's pick up and play, it saves the game automatically every time you warp into a new zone, so that's at the start of each, 10, however long the zones are, 10 minutes or something, so it's relatively dad friendly. And it's got this lovely 6 degrees of freedom dogfighting. I normally play from the third person view, because having the camera back by 10 meters is kind of helpful. Yes, and you've got strafe and duck and roll and all of those degrees of freedom, so the dogfighting is pretty fun. A little repetitive after a while, but there are boss creatures, and like a well-run RPG, each fight has sometimes got a little bit of a different mix of bad guys. Like there are bad guys that heal the other bad guys, or whatever, or missiles that you've got to shoot down before they hit you or dodge. So it's just good, it's lightweight and it's fun, and every time you lose you get to buy a permanent upgrade and then try again. I enjoy it, and maybe you will too. Oh, and the voice acting story is fine. Okay, Mike's games of 2023 from least nerdy to most nerdy. Number 2, Hades. This game has won so many awards, it's probably a lot of people's game of the year. I'm not even sure if it came out this year, but that's kind of besides the point. Hades, it's the latest in a long line. I don't know if you remember Bastion, but it's the latest and greatest in a line of these action RPGs. Action roguelites, a common theme for me. And it's won a lot of awards. It's a fantastic game. It's just an action RPG, dodge things, click on things to kill them. But everything about it is brilliantly designed. You can see this guy here is drafting from 3 options for an upgrade. He's looking at lightning bounces. Yeah, okay, so you are the son of Hades, the god of the underworld, and you are trying to break out of the underworld to the surface of Greece for plot reasons. It's just perfectly crafted in every way. It's not that it's doing something entirely a unique concept. It's just pretty much perfect in its execution. The thing that gives it replayability is the weapons and upgrade system. So first of all, there's 6 weapons, each of which makes your character fight fundamentally differently throughout the whole game. This guy's using the first one, which is the sword. It's kind of a general purpose melee weapon with an area of effect secondary, but there's also a bow, obviously, for ranged. There's like a spear, which is longer reached and attacks quite fast. The last weapon you can unlock is a gun, which is ranged and does rapid attacks. And then the key thing is every so often, pretty frequently, you get bestowed with a boon by one of the gods of Olympus. This guy has just started his run and he's picked Zeus boon, which is why there's little lightning bolts shooting out every time he attacks. Each of the gods have their own sort of domains. So like Zeus, his lightning powers do things like attacks that bounce. They're damage attacks and they bounce off people. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, has like critical hit and seeking missile type attacks. Athena, goddess of wisdom, has got more defensive powers that helps you deflect attacks. Right, here we go. So yeah, this guy again is choosing another blessing from Zeus. So he's got a choice of chain lightning, when he is hit, somebody near him is hit, all that kind of thing. So when you combine the 6 fundamentally different weapons with then constantly choosing upgrades, basically every game is a little bit different. It's got great pacing compared to the last game I showed, which was also a roguelite, Everspace. Pretty quickly, in like 20 minutes or something, 15 minutes, you get to the end of the zone, and then the next zone has its own bad guys, which have their own attack patterns, their own behaviours, their own art, the background art changes. And then the thing that elevates this above just being a really good action RPG roguelite with a load of upgrades is the art, the music, which are fantastic. These guys always do a great job with that. It's got a good plot, it's got brilliant voice acting. Yes, so you have an incredibly solid game with all of the beautiful polish. It's won a lot of awards and you should play it. I'm not sure I really have anything more to say about it apart from that it's just great in every way. It saves every time, a bit like Everspace, it saves every time you go into a room, so it's also extremely dad-friendly. Because you will never lose more than about 60 seconds of gameplay. Nice. Okay, Mike's Games of the Year 2023, and indeed every year recently. Unsurprisingly, The Long Dark. Probably my favourite game of the last half a decade. Or one of them. This border has been added by the YouTuber, that's not part of the game. The Long Dark. Some kind of apocalypse has killed all of the electrics and ruined civilization, and now you are alone in, I guess, rural Canada, remote rural Canada, trying to survive against the cold, as you can see from the needs gauge in the bottom left of warmth, rest, water and food. I have got into the habit of playing this every winter. It's a good thing about it is the difficulty levels are very broad. So if you just want to sort of explore the beautiful painterly art style of the environment and the weather, and play a relatively relaxed game where you don't need to worry too much about things, then you absolutely can do that. At this point, I am playing it on the extremely difficult difficulty level, where it is a constant fight survival. The fantasy, of course, is the glamour of civilization has fallen, but I've got my little axe and my little survival knife, and I've been out foraging for wood, and now I'm in my cozy. There's a blizzard outside, so I can't go outside right now, but I've got my fire. I'm going to sew some gloves out of rabbit skin. That's the cozy end of the fantasy. The other end of the fantasy is I'm in a blizzard. I'm freezing to death. I'm going to try to hide in this car, but it's still so cold. I'm still freezing to death. And the thing that makes it a good game, in my opinion, is that you are constantly making little trade-off decisions. Not formal decisions, but every minute. Like, you're getting hungry, getting colder. It's getting late. Do you go out to forage for some food? You've got time. You're not that tired. But if you go out there in the dark, it's going to get very cold. Maybe there could be a blizzard. Is it worth the risk of going outside, forage for some berries or whatever? Everything you do in no formalized way at all. It's completely a simulation in that regard, but every moment is, for me, an interesting decision. How much wood do I need to stick on this fire? Because I would like to be warmer, but I also am running out of fire. Do I stay up while it's daylight hours reading this book to improve my skills, or would I be better off sleeping? Can I get past that wolf, or do I need to go the long way around and incur all the tiredness that will involve? I found this shirt. Should I tear it up and make it into bandages, or will I regret it if I do that? That's what makes it a good game. Sorry, I'm just going to skip forward on this video because this person is just doing the camping part, which is very much part of the fun, but is a bit of a waste of the beautiful world graphics. So that's kind of the pitch for the game, basically. It does have a campaign story mode, if that's your thing. For me, it absolutely isn't. For me, what makes this game good is the open form survival game and having to learn your way around, because you start to learn the maps after a while. And then you can start to play on more difficulty modes, because you might know, for example, okay, I know that there is shelter. I know there's an intact porter cabin if I can just make it another 3 minutes in this cold. So if anything appeals to you about the kind of surviving by your wits and hunkering down when it's cold and then going out and exploring when it's mild, survival adventure, then I cannot recommend this more than to say that I've played it for about 500 hours lifetime total, and I'm still not bored of it. So if you have any interest in this kind of thing, it's an instant and complete recommend. Anything else I should say about it? I don't think so. It has a few short challenge modes, if that appeals to you. There's a few where you have to achieve a certain goal and it can only take so long, and then you either win or lose. But for me, as I've said before, the real heart of this game is foraging for crisps and then eating them and then realising it's made you thirsty, and then boiling some water. But then that used the last of your wood, so you better go out and get some wood. But while you're out getting some wood, the weather gets bad, and now you better find some shelter because you're getting wet and cold. Yeah, it's great. I love it. Play it. Okay, Mike's Games of the Year 2023, from least to most nerdy, getting into the more nerdy ones here with Battle Brothers. Battle Brothers is one of my favourite genres, a tactical management game. That is to say, you have a squad of fighters, you have to manage them on the strategic level and that map you were seeing just there, but then you also have to control the fights on the tactical level. Battle Brothers is you play as a no magic mercenary force in a low but not no magic fantasy, dark fantasy world, and you're mercenaries, so that obviously lends itself to a natural sort of gameplay model. This guy's got the animations turned up really fast in his game. Lends itself to a natural model where you have to run the mercenary company as a business, so you have to take a certain amount of risk in order to earn any money. But how much risk is right? Which jobs are too dangerous and should you steer clear of? Which jobs are too easy and you're not going to get paid enough to make it worth your time? And then you fight these battles. The best thing about it is the detailed but not annoying, detailed in a good way, combat model and equipment model, and the variety that brings, because different strategies but also different equipment and actions are better suited to different types of monsters. So your default opponents, not pictured here, are other humans, and they will probably have shields and swords and stuff like you, and it'll be a relatively straightforward battle. But as you can see here, you might also be called upon to fight zombies, and they too, because they are like humans and carry weapons and have armor, are one of the more mundane enemies. There are goblins and orcs who are a bit more different. You might have to fight wildlife like wolves or giant spiders, who again then have their own behaviours, and then even more magical things. And the fun of it is the combat's model, while comprehensible, is pretty detailed. You have armor hit points, and then your health hit points. You have weapons which pierce armor better than others. You have weapons like hammers, for example, which ignore armor better than others. And then each weapon generally does two things, and one of them is usually like hit the enemy. But then let's say if you have a sword, you can do a sort of Overwatch riposte. If you have an axe, you can damage your opponent's shield. Specifically try to destroy the shield, which they are good at doing, so that then your enemy stops blocking with the shield. If you have a spear, you have a normal attack, but then you maybe have like an Overwatch push back. If they come adjacent to you, then you will push them back by a hex. So it's rich, mechanically rich, and as I've kind of touched on already, the really fun part is starting to figure out your tactics and your equipment, because while the game has really good tooltips to explain to you this is what a sword does and how it compares to a mace, and this is how it's mechanically different, what the game is careful never to say is, I don't want to spoil anything, but like, weapon X is going to be a lot better against the undead than weapon Y, because although they notionally do the same damage, there are reasons why you might want this particular type of weapon against the undead. I don't want to spoil it. But that's really the fun of it, because not only are you building up your company, earning money, gaining reputation, upgrading your guys from leather to mail. Oh good, I've got a pike, I can stop using this shitty pitchfork. The real fun of it is figuring out, this kind of, I remember from this kind, because you can look it up if you want, but it's more fun to learn it through experience, take a beating. I know this kind of enemy, we might as well not wear our armor at all because it weighs us down, and I know from previous experience that this particular kind of supernatural creature, the armor does us no good. So that's the fun of it, learning the expertise. What was the other thing I was going to say? Edit this out. The trick to enjoying the game, and the thing that made me only really get into it properly on my second sort of go at playing it, is and they do try to warn you about this, you have to be okay with losing a guy or two, or having them permanently crippled. If you get too attached to your dudes, you're just swimming upstream, because the game is designed that at some point something's going to go wrong, and unless you save scum constantly, which you definitely shouldn't, at some point somebody's going to get their foot chopped off or just killed. So your character really is your company and its equipment, and the game design supports that, because you might lose a man. The way the game is designed, it's quite easy to lose a man, or for a man to lose an eye, or something like that in this grimdark fantasy land. But there's not many scenarios in which the game punishes you by, like, taking away your gold or taking away the equipment. Even if maybe you win a battle, some of your soldiers die, of course, the equipment is still there. You can hire a new replacement soldier to give them the old soldier's equipment. So you are absolutely, just because you lose some men and some experience, maybe you've probably gained some gold, you gained some equipment, you have still progressed. And as long as you're in that mindset and not feeling too upset if you have a bad battle, then you should have a good time. It also has good pacing on the campaign level. After 80 or 100 game days or whatever it is, some kind of random end game crisis will come, which will ramp up the tension and essentially put you through a test like, is this crisis going to overcome you, or can you survive it? So yes, if you are interested in a mechanically detailed, gritty, dark fantasy tactical game of learning to defeat monsters, roaming the wilderness, doing jobs. The writing's nice as well. I guess they've read some sort of dark fantasy novels and are fans. There's just some sort of text story when you talk to people and get missions, but it's all consistently nicely written, in my opinion. So, Battle Brothers, yes, get it if you want a tactics and strategy game. Okay, Mike's most nerdy game of the year 2023 is Nebulous Fleet Command, a 3D real-time multiplayer RTS where you design your own ships. So this is team versus team, 4v4. There are 2 factions, each of which have 6 hulls each. So like corvettes, that's the smallest class you can see on the screen there, all the way up to heavy cruisers and battleships. Points-based system like a war game, so you design your own fleet. Could be anything from like sneaky corvettes that are barely armed at all to just one massive battleship, and you get them into fights. You win the games by a point system from capturing capture points, which is very important because it means the game is not just everyone flies into the middle and shoots. You may want to do that if you're a battleship, but it means any lighter weight ship, when it encounters a heavier weight ship that could maybe beat it in a fight, is incentivized to consider evading, going behind an asteroid, turning its radar off, that sort of thing. This game is developed by someone who's actually in the Navy, so it's relatively heavily based on contemporary naval warfare. Not completely, because there are particle beams and cannon turrets and stuff, which either don't exist in real life or became obsolete 80 years ago, but there's a heavy emphasis on things like signals intelligence. So, for example, there's no fog of war. If you don't see an enemy ship on the map, that doesn't mean they aren't there. They might not be there, but you also might not have detected them. The damage modeling is very sophisticated, so it's all about, just like any war nerd is likely to do, it's all about thickness of armor plates and what angle the bullet hits them on. An armor-piercing shell will go through armor better if it hits it flat on, but if it hits it at an angle, it might bounce off and go and smack into an asteroid somewhere. Missiles are probably the most complicated part of the game, because you can set, depending on the capabilities of the missile, you might be able to set them on waypoints, have them fly around an asteroid and then go and look for something to kill. In the bottom right you can see the plan view of the ships, so you, as I've mentioned already, you design the ships yourselves. You put the weapons on the hard points. Do you want turrets? Do you want missile launchers? Do you want particle cannons? Point defense, chain guns, flak guns, point defense lasers. Then there's berthing. How much damage control do you need to be able to repair things mid-battle? And then you get into these big fights. The music's good and dynamic. There's not a lot of the music, but it sounds great. What you can see here is some relatively small ships with particle beams absolutely slicing the boop out of an unlucky target, which is probably going to die. In the top left you can see the status reports of all the individual ships. They're green on their ammunition, they're blue on their crew morale, so that's fine, but I can see some of them have got fires on board or systems out. And all those green crosses are missiles. So basically that red diamond on the left is a radar trace of an unidentified enemy ship that is getting an absolute beating. It's extremely deep. You can turn off your radar, turn off your radios, which has obvious disadvantages but also makes you harder to detect. So you can play a little bit more like a submarine, become sort of blind but also difficult to spot, try and sneak around the back of these asteroids and steal some capture points. Do I need to explain the appeal of designing your own extremely detailed spaceships and then getting them into fleet battles? Probably not. It's difficult because it's complicated, a bit overwhelming, and all of it's in 3D, which is quite challenging. But nothing I have played is quite like it. The Battlefleet Gothic game's alright, but it's really on a different level of sort of complexity, and I love this really hard sci-fi. So don't know what more I can say about it. Basically, you want to design your own warships and then get into real-time fights with them. It's normally 4v4 online multiplayer against strangers or members of the community, but you can play against bots. You could play with me against bots if you wanted to have a so-called comp stomp. The AI is unfortunately not very imaginative, but they will put up a fight. Play it. I love it. Sadly, the guy who develops it has gone back to the Navy. He's called up to be on a ship somewhere, but in the works hopefully are quote aircraft like fighters and bombers and stuff, and also a campaign mode, which hopefully will be really fun. I think it could go either way depending on how the guy designs it. When your ships are abandoned, they can just fizzle out, but if the reactor's on fire, sometimes they overload. At which point there is a large explosion, everything nearby gets melted, and all of your radar goes on the fritz from the electromagnetism, which can be useful. Right, that's it. Merry Christmas, I guess.